All right, this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming, and I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station, and it's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, thanks for being here this Wednesday, July 22nd. Some weird news out of the Middle East. I'm very confused by this. I don't really understand fully what it means. Hopefully tomorrow we are going to be chatting with University of Chicago professor Robert Pape, who can help me make some sense out of this. But the weird thing is, we have apparently signed a deal with Saudi Arabia that some people are saying basically gives Saudi Arabia the permission to build its own nuclear bomb. We have agreed to allow Saudi Arabia to enrich uranium with basically, if I understand this correctly, no real guardrails. I don't understand why we would do that. Maybe, Saudi Arabia wields more influence over us, particularly the Trumps, than I think anybody realizes. Saudi Arabia is basically the number one benefactor to Jared Kushner, his hedge fund, Saudi Arabia. Remember when Donald Trump he announced Operation Freedom, where we were going to use our jet fighters to make sure ships got through the Strait of Hormuz? But like most things in this conflict, this war, Donald Trump did it without consulting anybody, gave nobody a heads up, did not consult any of our supposed allies in the region. And Saudi Arabia got a little ticked. They had been out of the loop just one too many times. And they said, no. You want to do Operation Freedom? Well, that's all well and good, but you will not be doing it out of the air bases that are in Saudi Arabia. There will be no military flights out of our air bases. And of course, without that, that's where the fighter jets were. That's where the fighter jets were that we were going to use to verify this. So within 24 hours, suddenly Donald Trump announced that, you know how that Operation Freedom thing that I talked about? Yeah, I've decided it's not a good idea. Not that Saudi Arabia basically pulled the rug out from under us. So clearly MBS is getting tired of being not exactly ignored, but certainly kept out of the loop. And I'm wondering if this isn't some sort of peace offering, which would be pretty ironic. Hey, because we want to keep peace with you, we're going to let you enrich uranium. And, if you build a bomb, what the heck, you build a bomb. Okay, all righty. We have been trying very hard to keep as many countries nuclear free in the Middle East as we can. Tensions often run high. I mean, we can't do anything about Israel, but I'm sure Israel would also like to be the only country in the region that has nukes. But we have not given Saudi Arabia nukes, but we have given them, signed an agreement that I believe is supposed to run 30 years. 30 years. You know what, guys? You're our favoritist ally out of all of them. We like you the best. You're better than all the rest. So we're going to let you enrich uranium. You know, one of the reasons why we've been fighting against Iran is we don't want them to enrich uranium. But you can. We'll let you. Okay. Does that make any sense to you? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. No, I am confused. I am very confused. But that is what has happened. I don't know if Donald Trump ran this by the Senate or the Congress. My guess is no, because he doesn't feel he has to give anybody a heads up. He doesn't have to get anybody's opinion. So there you go. Apparently we've made Saudi Arabia very happy. So please, oh, please, oh, please don't kick us out of your country and let us use those air bases anytime we want to. Okay? Okay, how's that for a deal? What do you say? Deal? Apparently so. Apparently Saudi Arabia said, yeah, you know, that works for us. You know, we do that. Or even worse, Saudi Arabia suggested it. Oh, you want to make us happy? You know, you've been kind of ignoring us, making us not feel special. So why don't you do this for us? I know, allow us to enrich uranium. And you know what? It's not like you're giving us the plans to build a bomb. You're just saying we can enrich uranium. It wouldn't surprise me one little bit if Saudi Arabia went to the Trump administration and said, you know what? We feel that we are being treated very badly. And you want to fix this relationship? Here's how you do it. And yeah, you can explain it any way you want, but here's what you're going to do. Does that seem like something that wouldn't happen? Because it seems to me like something that would be likely to happen, don't you think? So we have that. We have that. By the way, as is our usual practice, Monday through Thursday, we are opening up the phone and text lines, 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. You can text me, as some of you already have. You can text me on that line. You can call Lady B and ask to be put on the radio. We'll do that as well. What else is going on today? Well, funny, you should ask that. Remember Hegseth and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, appeared before a Senate committee? I didn't happen to see that. I was kind of dipping in and out of it. I didn't see when it was Dick Durbin's time to speak. But you know, he may have decided to retire. He may be a lame duck, but he is going out swinging. Going out swinging. Listen to Dick Durbin chat with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth yesterday. Listen to this.
I don't know what Lloyd Austin did for 4 years. I really don't.
Well, I'm sure
the amount of neglect,
sure
the amount of stale thinking and bureaucracy,
proceed, if I
it
might,
was staggering when we took over. So one big beautiful bill gave us a chance to get caught back up.
Let me interrupt your speech for a minute, Mr. Secretary. It's my turn to ask questions. I've been listening patiently while you made your presentation. You estimated at one point that the cost of the war in Iran was $29 billion, but then added a caveat that there was a replacement of munitions, for example. Do you have a new estimate about what the war has cost us so far in this, the 5th month of the first year of this war in Iran?
Senator, the estimate we have as of today is $37.5 billion.
And is the current activity, which we've been told about, the exchange of fire back and forth in Iran, an indication that that number is going to go up in the months ahead?
Some of that number captures additional O&M, mill pay, and other that would be anticipated through the fiscal year. So some of that anticipates what costs would be going out in the future as well.
So the new number you've given me is what?
$37.5 billion.
So there, Dick Durbin, cool, calm, and collected, and yet getting solid information out of Pete Hegseth. Chris Van Hollen was also in that hearing, and after he left, he posted a video. You know, I don't know if somebody's telling these guys now they need to be on TikTok or social media, but a lot of Democrats are coming out of these meetings and doing a social media recording of what just happened and what they thought about it. I found this Chris Van Hollen sound about his experience with Mr. Hegseth in that committee meeting on Instagram. Listen to Chris Van Hollen.
I just got out of a Senate hearing where I questioned Secretary Hegseth. And I have to say, I'm even more worried and afraid for our country now than I was when I went into that room. I said, Mr. Secretary, you talk a lot about winning. What does winning look like? And there was no clear answer. And then he finally settled on making sure Iran does not get a nuclear weapon. But I pointed out to the Secretary that he told the country last year, and I'm quoting, our bombing campaign obliterated Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons. That's what Secretary Hegseth told the country last year. That's what President Trump told the country. Now they tell us that the mission in this war is to prevent Iran from creating nuclear weapons that they say they obliterated. So this is a war now in search of a mission. The Secretary got most heated and animated when I made the point that the best way to prevent wars is not to start them in the first place. And America and Israel, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, started this war. Hegseth, he said this war started over 40 years ago. Well, it is true that Prime Minister Netanyahu has said he has been waiting 40 years to wage this war against Iran. It's just that it took him 40 years to find a president and administration stupid enough and reckless enough to start a war that they don't know how to end. The way to end this war, though, is just to stop. This senseless war should never have started, and now it just needs to stop.
Chris Van Hollen talking about his conversation with Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth and Joint Chiefs Chair Kane, General Kane, went before the Senate Judiciary Committee to, it was a Senate committee, it wasn't Judiciary, went before the Senate to ask for more money. Ask for more money. So, I'm sure they'll get it because right now the Republicans have a majority, and the Republicans have pretty much been getting whatever they want. Unfortunately, the stuff they want isn't really anything that helps us. They wanted cuts to Medicaid, they got them. They wanted to do away with the subsidies for the ACA, they did that. They wanted tax cuts for the wealthiest among us. Yeah, let's do that too. So they can get things done when they want to. It's just that what they want to do isn't really very helpful. I also want to touch on Donald Trump's promise that as of August 18th, he's going to impose more tariffs, 50% tariffs on Canada. I have shared with you in the past videos posted by Todd Maffin, and he wryly, satirically, but very pointedly talks about Donald Trump and what he's trying to do. And he did a video, but, you know, let me share the things that we are going to put these tariffs on. They're not really the things that we need from Canada. The potash that our farmers need, yeah, there's no tariff on that. The rare earth minerals, the ones we get from Canada, no, they're not on the tariff list either, because that's what we want from Canada. What are we putting tariffs on? Wigs, false beards, eyebrows, and hair extensions. Hockey sticks. Some dairy products. Certain types of alcohol. Softwood lumber. Todd Maffin said, if you look at all of the things, all of the products, all of the exports that Donald Trump wants to put these 50% tariffs on, Trump, or because I don't really believe, I believe his people come to him and say, hey, boss, why don't we do this? Do you honestly think Donald Trump researches anything? Do you honestly think he comes up with ideas on his own? Hey, I know, let's do this, and here's how we're going to do it. No, he's not even interested in that. One of his aides comes to him with an axe to grind and says, you know what, let's do this, and let's do it at this level, and let's do it against these products. Todd Maffin said all of the items that are going to be subject to this 50% tariff comprise less than 1% of Canada's exports. So it's a bunch of hot air. Mark Carney did say to Donald Trump, you know, we're doing these talks to try to find an agreement. Let's really ramp that up. Let's do it faster and sooner. But even if it comes to nothing, there's very little of any importance that he's putting these tariffs on. The major thing he's accomplishing with this is further angering and alienating our friends from Canada. Our past friends. I don't know that they're friends anymore. The people we were once friendly with, he's giving them more and more and more reasons to really, really dislike us. And meanwhile, does he care about anything that's going on in this country? Does he care about gas prices? David from Bloomingdale just texted in, Joan, update on gas prices here in Bloomingdale. Yesterday, $3.89 a gallon. Yesterday, $3.89 a gallon. Today, $4.29 a gallon. And with the way things are going and the fact that oil tankers are no longer moving, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Some experts are saying don't be surprised if a gallon of the cheapest gas you can get gets to be over $5. So, yeah, thank you, Mr. President, for paying attention, to the important stuff. But, as Donald Trump said, affordability is a hoax. It's a Democratic hoax. So you're not really paying more at the grocery store. You're not. Stop saying it. You're not really paying more for gas. And if you are, it's only for a short period of time, and it's worth it. It should be your willing sacrifice. That's my favorite. That's my favorite line, that we should just be willing to suck it up for the good of the country. Is that why? Possibly. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like, being brave and taking one for the team? I don't. He is such an embarrassment. Oh, by the way, remember that video when Spain won the World Cup and Donald Trump was on stage with them and kept standing? They were getting ready to take a team picture, and he kept standing there in front of them. And the head of FIFA, whatever the heck his name is, got up on the stage and took Trump by the arm to pull him off to the side. But, he pulled Trump, but then Trump kind of freed himself and turned back again to the audience. But then I don't know what he said to Donald Trump, but then he convinced Donald Trump to step away so that the team could get a team picture. They did some fireworks and some other stuff. And you could hear on a hot mic one of the announcers saying, don't worry, we're going to cut him out. We will cut him out of the photo. And they did. If you look at the team photo from after they won, after they got their trophy, the photo that was released by the team, Donald Trump isn't in it. That is what the rest of the world thinks of us. Our president is a buffoon. Our president is a buffoon, and we need to cut him out. Whew, let's cut this guy out of the picture. Oh, my God. How embarrassing. How embarrassing for us. It's not embarrassing for Donald Trump because he's out of it. He's out of it. He doesn't know. I mean, who's gonna go to their boss, Donald Trump? Who's gonna go to their boss and say, "Man, boss, you really shouldn't have done that. You really shouldn't have done that. It was kind of an embarrassment." Nobody's going to say that to him. Nobody is going to say that to him. They would never do that because he is not somebody who ever wants to hear anything negative. Yep, that's him. That is the person that we put in the White House. The demented in chief. We are going to be taking a break. When we come back, I'm going to take your calls. I'm going to read some of your texts. It is Wednesday. Okay, we're halfway through. Let's just take a big breath and embrace the Wednesday. What do you say? What do you say? Let's do it. We are going to be right back after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Want to join the conversation?
I'm going to say exactly what I think here.
Got something to say?
Everyone needs to hear what I got to say.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
We are taking your calls and reading your texts. Again, that number, 773-763-9278. And I want to remind you that in our final hour today, we are going to be talking to longtime newsman David Layman, and the phone lines and text lines will be open again from 4 to 5 p.m. should you decide to join us at that time. And I hope you do. Somebody texted in, I'll gladly take one for the team if I can grift over $2 billion in the last few years and have no shame or self-awareness, as does the liar-in-chief. Hope all the Kool-Aid drinking cult members who monitor your show are taking notes. Yep. Grifter-in-chief. That is who this guy is. The amount of money that he and his family has made is staggering. Just staggering. Okay, let's go to the phone lines. Dave from Huffman Estates is on the line. Hello, Dave. How are you?
Hey, Joan. On talking about that with Saudi Arabia and that allowing them to get the uranium and possibly nuclear. How tone deaf are these reporters even? On coming up in about 6 weeks, we'll be coming up on the 25th anniversary of when the towers came down, which had 15 Saudi Arabians of the 19th hijackers.
Yep, and because they've always been somebody we wanted to stay in their good graces, Saudi Arabia has never really been held to account for the part that it played in 9/11. That's always been kind of glossed over.
Yep, and kind of makes you wonder how much money under the table that prince gave to Trump, that passing this.
He's personally keeping Jared afloat.
Yeah, exactly. I think, after the first one, didn't Jared send over some thumb drives over to him?
I don't know, but supposedly the very first thing MBS asked was he wanted Jared to make sure that the murder of Adnan Khashoggi, the Washington Post columnist that MBS had murdered, he wanted to make sure that they sort of, downplayed that. No investigation, no real charges, no real blame, just downplay it. That was, I believe, Jared's first mission.
Yeah, exactly. And then, back to that, how many of these people ran around with the, talking about the 9/11 with the ribbon stickers or ribbon magnets on their cars say "Never Forget." Apparently, they're forgetting already. But hey, I just remember I mentioned to you about that the other week, that one unidentified body they found over in Jordan. Well, I just read where the Defense Department yesterday said that Sergeant Angel S. Rampersad, 28-year-old of Ozone Park, New York, as the third soldier killed during that enemy attack at Mafalak Salty Air Base, Jordan. And they said that the incident's under investigation, with the soldier status updated from missing to believed to be deceased. So
yeah, and for it to take this long to identify the remains, that means that there was not a lot of that particular military person left. They probably had to use like DNA. I believe in the military, if you join up in the military, especially if you are deployed, I believe that in addition to dental records, you have to have DNA on file. And,
like I was telling you, they take the DNA nowadays. And then also that one in Erbil, Iraq, they've identified him as a sergeant too, the one that went to that drone that exploded.
The one who was there when the drone, there was an Iranian drone that landed and it didn't blow up. And before it could be decommissioned, it did blow up after it was on the ground. And that took out one of our military people.
Yeah, he was a 30-year-old guy, that one. And I think he had a family, too, back home and that, kids. But there again, that's another one. They probably didn't get a whole lot of, other than boots and, because these things can blow buildings pretty good, and if there's a human right by it, there ain't a whole lot. But anyway, and then lastly, before you get out, I just read where Iran warned Bulgaria against aiding U.S. military operations and for the U.S. to use its territory for military operations against Iran.
Who was going to allow us to use their territory?
Bulgaria.
Bulgaria? Huh. That's what I thought you said.
Yeah, that base, for like tankers or whatever and that.
Well, they better
that
hope
they
they're
urge-
far enough away. I don't know how far Iranian drones and missiles can travel, but I hope Bulgaria has done the math before they offer to help us out.
I don't think they got no Iron Dome with them,
Yeah.
It says that they use it mainly for tanker aircraft refueling and stuff like that, and they urge Bulgaria not to become an accomplice of aggressors and lawbreakers, they said. So
Yeah, I'm kind of
Anyway.
surprised after seeing how our allies have been hit by Iran. I'm kind of surprised that somebody would step up and say, "Oh, I'll give you a hand. Sure. Good. Yeah. That works for me."
Yeah. And anyway, you had a Bulgarian government looking to seek parliamentary approval to station up to 8 U.S. tanker aircrafts at an airbase in the Balkan country, which is a member of NATO and the EU also. So anyway, just thought you might like that little tidbit, and let me get off so others can give some news.
Yeah, appreciate that, Dave.
Thanks, Joe. Be well.
You too. Let's go to Schiller Park. Phoenicia, is that how I say your name? Phoenicia?
Yes, you said it correctly. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the call today.
I enjoy always, of course, like many other viewers, I enjoy your show. I did call you back in January when Trump took office, but today I'm calling because you mentioned that the Spanish soccer team, the championships, when they took that photo, they cut Trump out. And which I was very happy. And I'm an immigrant. I should have said that on the radio, but it is what it is. And you mentioned what the Europeans might think of us, I am from Europe. I was born in Italy. I have relatives in France. I have relatives in Switzerland and friends in Switzerland. And I have relatives in Germany. I'm not that familiar with Germany like I am with the other three countries, but I just wanted your audience to know is those countries, and most of Europe, they like Americans. I'm always communicating them. I have gone back and forth for several years. They like us. Right now, this is my own personal experience, what my relatives and friends tell me. They feel sorry for us. They can't believe how the U.S. has turned from the example of democracy. We were it in the world as what democracy looked like and should look like. We were the idea of democracy. They can't believe that folded and is starting to fold even more.
I feel sorry for us too, Phoenicia. I feel sorry for us too.
That's their perspective, And the people in Italy, they understand because we went through Mussolini. My parents were under Mussolini. My dad was a prisoner in the Italian army. I mean, he was a prisoner in Germany. So they understand how it could happen because they've been through it. But no one ever thought it would happen here, in the U.S.
Yeah. We would have 15 years ago, we would have said this was impossible.
Right. And yet here we are. But they do like us. They just think they feel sorry for us.
Yeah, that's my sense. They like Americans, but they don't like America. And I get that.
Right. Well, yeah, right. And
it's sort of like a lot of us feel about Israel. We like Jewish people. We just don't like Benjamin Netanyahu.
We never did. I remember him when I was growing up. People were calling him a warmonger. And he found the perfect person, like it was mentioned on your radio, perfect person to, do what he wanted.
Yep.
And they understand what we're going through. They also, we were Europe's not only ally, we were Europe's protector. The U.S. protected Europe. Whatever problems they had, they could always count on us. That's no longer the case. They think, some people think Russia is more of an ally than the U.S. Figure that one out. So there's the idea that America has shifted for the European people, at least the ones I know. This is my own personal perspective on it. But, yeah, they lost that protection. And at first they were very nervous like if America's not there, and now they've sort of gotten together and forming their own trades, their own reputations, their own agreements.
Yep.
NATO is.
Well, they're cutting us out because they can't count on us. Yeah. You know, why make an agreement with the United States when you don't know if it's going to be honored by the next administration? I get that. Fanizia, I've got to get to a break, but I thank you so much for the call.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the call. One little news item before we do get to the break, because I know I haven't mentioned anything about Epstein today. The Guardian U.S. is reporting that a guy who was a scout for models for Jeffrey Epstein has been found dead at his home in Paris. Apparently, he was mentioned on 1,000 pages of the Epstein files. He was under investigation in France for rape and other charges, and he has been found dead at his home near Paris. He was 69 years old. His name was Daniel Siad. So there's your little Epstein update for today. I am trying to figure out the cause of death, but it has not been released. There is an investigation going on, and they're going to do an autopsy. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
We have been talking on and off about gas prices, and somebody texted in that at Costco on Friday, gas was $3.99. Here's a little secret I found. You know, back when I used to drive a gas car, man, I was looking everywhere for the cheapest gas I could find, and it was Costco. Every time it was Costco. Sometimes the amount you would save would vary, but it was always cheaper, to the point where I actually bought a Costco membership just so I could get my gas there. So there's a little secret for you. If you've got a Costco anywhere near you, that's probably going forward where you're going to find the cheapest gas. Let's go back to the phone lines. Ron's on the line from Chicago. Hey, Ron.
Hello. Yes, Pete Hegseth should have been asked, when will there be a ground invasion? Because all this bombing is doing nothing.
I hope that he said there will never be a ground invasion. Is that what he said? Yeah, no ground invasion ever. We promise.
Oh, is that what he said?
No, that's what I'm hoping he said, but he probably didn't say it.
No. And his cost estimate of what was it, $37.5 million? I don't believe that. I think it's way over $100 billion. Has to be.
Yeah, I thought that the figure was billion with a B. Sometimes I have trouble hearing the difference between million and billion, but I'm pretty sure we're talking billions now.
Yeah. It has to be over $100 billion by now.
Yeah, you would think.
After 5 months.
Oh.
Yeah. And also, there are now 18 service people who have been killed, and I think that they should be given something from Trump's slush fund as a payment for their service.
Well, that would be an honorable use for that money. But, you know, Todd Blanche says that slush fund is gone. He won't put it in writing, which a judge asked him to do. Okay, it's gone. You're saying it's gone forever. Write that up and give me the document. No. Won't write it up. Won't put it in writing. But I'm telling you, it's gone. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Because we trust him so much. Thanks, Ron. Thanks for that. Let's go back to the phone lines. Chi-Town Dave is on the line. Hey, Dave, how are you?
I'm telling you, it's gone.
Dave, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here. I had to run and get my phone. I had to put my phone on the battery charger to my battery was running. Hey,
well, we better talk fast.
Yes. Well, I connected the charger to it, so it's okay. Warn all of you. you better be shaking in your boots because Steve Miller has put together a compilation of people he wants to have arrested. We are all communists, and you're going to get a knock at your door. You, Paul, Jim, Ron, everybody, be ready for that big knock at your door, and they're going to take you away. They're going to take us away to one of the concentration camps. We are all terrorists, domestic terrorists. So take that and see what you can do with it. We're all going to be arrested.
That's a distinct possibility. If they come to my door and want to know if I'm a communist, I will tell them no, but I don't think they're going to care. If they take me away, they take me away. I'm old. I don't have that much to worry about anymore.
Hey, listen, they're not going to care about that. They're not going to care about. They're not going to care about me either. I'm blind, but they're not going to care about that. I'm old too. I'm not going to care. They're not going to care about that. Ron and Paul, you're all old. They're not going to care about you. They'll take you anyway.
Yep, I agree.
So, and by the way, on the pasta, you hear about the pasta deal? According to some Republicans, you got to show an ID for that Forever Pasta or the Unlimited Pasta Pass at Olive Garden.
Oh, I saw Olive Garden in a headline, and I thought, what the heck is that? But I didn't have time to read the article. Is there a pasta pass?
Yeah, there's a unlimited pasta pass that you get, but in order to get it, you got to show your birth certificate and you got to show your state ID or your driver's license, and you got to God only knows what other identification they might want, according to some Republicans. Well, apparently that's what's going on.
Well, I'm very disappointed in Olive Garden.
Well, you can double check. I mean, you can read the article, you can double check. But, I'm telling you, I guess it's true. I guess maybe they're right. I don't know. I don't know if that's true.
Well, I hope not. But when I go back, I'm going to Google Olive Garden, because when I saw the headline about Olive Garden, I thought, well, that's something I can leave for later. That can't be all that important. But, maybe I was wrong. Maybe that wasn't an article I should have skipped.
It's important that, no, you shouldn't have skipped it. It's important if because it might be true. It might be one of the Republicans may be telling the truth on that. I don't know.
Well, I guess we'll investigate. We will investigate, Dave, and get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, get to the bottom of it. Investigate it. I hope it's not true.
Well, I will look it up and see what I can find. Thank you for the heads up. Thank you for the tip. And thank you for the call. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Got another text. And, the only reason I'm reading this, I heard this as well, that Barron Trump is friendly with the Tate brothers. The Tate brothers who've been accused of rape and human trafficking and all this really bad behavior. They were taken into custody in Miami, not because we want to hold them to account, but they are being extradited to the United Kingdom, where they are facing a whole slew of charges. No, as a matter of fact, we welcomed them. Yep. One of Trump's cronies said, hey, these are good guys. You ought to let them back in the country. Trump said, okay. And I have not seen confirmation of that, but the rumor circulating that I will try to confirm is that the Tate brothers are friends of Barron Trump. So, yeah, there you go. Let's go back to the phone lines. Paul is on the line from Seattle. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Hey, Joan. I like Ron was saying about Pete Hegseth's numbers don't seem to ring true. That I seem to recall after 2 months of the war that estimates were $75 billion.
The estimate initially was we were spending $1 billion a day. And clearly they want to continue the war. So I'm pretty sure that number Hegseth was throwing around was billion with a B.
Right. So after 2 months, $75 billion sounds about right. Where we were.
Yep.
So, okay, but let's look at it this way. Let's take this take him at his at face value. I'd never take him at his word, but let's take what he said at face value. That's $37.5 billion, and I think they're requesting 67 additional billion, right? 67 billion, which counts out to 180% of what's already been spent. So, and that projects that if at current spending levels, this would just perpetuate, if they were to do the same thing, perpetuate this war for 9 more months.
Oh,
So,
you mean it's going to be a forever war? Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, I think it. I mean, because 67 billion is not enough to end the war by putting troops on the ground. Because remember, 23 years ago, it was the initial funding for the Iraq invasion was the famous 87 billion, which I was for before I was against it. So 67 billion is not enough to do anything other than simply perpetuate what's going on now. And that, to me, sounds like the intention is to simply manipulate the market.
Oh, the Trump family would never do that, Paul.
No,
they would never do that.
No.
Though there have been reports that Trump himself and his family members are trading stocks virtually every day. And, you heard what he wants to do with Truth Social. Yeah. If you're a company, you can pay Truth Social an amount of money, and before Donald Trump posts something, you will get it a few seconds or a little bit earlier than when it posts publicly. And what would be the reason to have that? Would that be like insider information? Could companies buy and sell and make decisions based on that heads up they're getting? Oh, my God.
Well, you know what, Joan? I was just thinking, if Donald Trump was such a master negotiator and a real estate guy and a stock trader, that what he would have done from the very beginning, because I think he knew this, he would have to have known that this deal with Saudi Arabia to allow them to start enriching uranium was in the hopper at some point. But he could still do this, is to say to Iran, look, let's end this war peacefully. How about we buy, your enriched uranium from you for, let's say, $40 billion, and then take that, come and pick it up, and then just take it over to Saudi Arabia and sell it to them for about $200 billion.
Yeah, so they don't have to bother enriching their own, even though they can do that legally now.
Yeah, why? Say, hey, we have some for you. And then we know where the uranium is, and that's how you do. You buy low and sell high, right?
That's right. I think that's a fine idea.
Great maker, yeah, that's what you do. But I don't know. I don't trust any of this. And of course, Pete Hegseth and his homoerotic workout videos and his forming while he's doing his pull-ups. I don't know. This guy is just really, and the way he barks at the senators and I don't know.
He's such a man, don't you think, Paul? He's such a man.
Yeah, well, you know what? Honestly, he probably does need some testosterone supplements. That's what he's begging for.
I saw him trying to do pull-ups. It was embarrassing. Yeah. It's embarrassing. Yeah. I could do a pull-up that well because, he's kicking his legs out. He's trying to get some momentum because his arms aren't strong enough. Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's what I haven't seen it, but that's what I hear. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well,
yeah. It's not impressive. Not impressive at all.
No, I guess not. So, I just don't trust the numbers, and I intend to call my representatives in Congress and say no votes for more money for this disaster. But I think you're right. The Republicans will pass it because they still have no spine.
Right.
No spines. And you know what's interesting though is that, and I took it seriously finally when you had Professor Marjorie Hershey on and asked her what's up with the Republicans. Why can't they stand up to them? And she said because she thinks that they are being threatened.
Yeah.
She thinks that the Republicans are being threatened by their base, and that they get people. They're afraid that their families are going to be harmed. I don't know why the Democrats aren't being threatened, but or maybe they are. But it sounds like I wouldn't expect that from Professor Hershey if it didn't have. She wouldn't say that.
Right.
If she didn't think there was some truth to it.
They've already said it. I mean, that's part of the reason why Mitt Romney wanted to get out of political life. And he said, I don't know if this is still the case, he said that he was paying, luckily he's very rich, he was paying $5,000 a day, I think it was, or maybe a week, to protect his various family members because of all the threats MAGA had made to him. It's just unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, a day would sound like. Yeah. Okay.
I need to get to the news, but thank you so much, Paul, for the call. We are going to be back with much more right after the news.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Anybody who listens to this show for any length of time knows that I am deeply disturbed by the idea of book bans. I am deeply disturbed by the idea of making some books forbidden. I believe that every parent has the right to determine what their child reads. But if a parent finds something offensive, that doesn't necessarily apply to other families. That's where it gets really sticky. Somebody who goes to a school library and says, I don't want my child reading these 4 books, and the librarian makes a note of it, and if the child tries to take those books out, the librarian says, you know what, you got to talk to your parents. But a person going into a school library or even a public library and saying, you know what, I think this is a bad book and I don't think anybody should read it, and I think you should remove it from your shelves. You know what, that's a bridge too far. That's a bridge too far. I don't think that we should force other people to share all of our ideas. Certainly, we don't want to force other people to abide by the rules of our religion if that doesn't happen to be their religion. Live and let live. A book you may find terrifically offensive, another family might find enjoyable or enlightening, or at least not disturbing. There is another move in the Senate to go after library materials. Sarah Lambden is the executive director of the American Library Association, also executive director of the Freedom to Read Foundation, and is here to talk with me about that. First of all, Sarah, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Joan, and thanks for your concern about this timely and important topic.
It just drives me crazy when people feel that whatever their religious or moral or ethical beliefs are, that should be what the rules that everybody has to follow. Tell me about Senate Bill, I believe it's 4925, Senate Bill 4925.
Yeah, you've got it. That's the bill number. So this bill is actually part of a set of similar bills. A couple similar bills were introduced in the House earlier this year. And those bills, it's House Bill 7661 and House Bill, I think it's 2616, just a little raft of censorship bills, really. They all have similar components. So they tie funding that is meant to help schools educate children and help, teach English as a second language, help disadvantaged communities make sure that they have access to education. It ties those critically important funds to the eradication of quote unquote sexually oriented materials. So what is a sexually oriented material? That's a very unclear, very dangerously broad term. But if you have any materials in your school library that somebody might consider quote unquote sexually oriented, you could be stripped of the critical funding that your school needs and your community needs.
Who's behind this? Is it an activist organization? Is it just some sort of radical elected official who thinks they're doing what their voters want? Where is this coming from?
So that's a really good question. These types of bills are similar to bills that we've seen in state legislatures. And usually in the states, they're driven by these ideological groups. So the American Library Association tracks censorship trends across the country. And the most shocking finding that we have had in recent years is that these drives to push censorship legislation, to push censorship activities, are actually coming from a tiny group of very
Radical.
and very well moneyed, right? Very
well, that's what we
well-funded
that's what
organizations.
That's what I talked about with, I think it was Deborah Caldwell Stone from the ALA when she was still working with you guys. The fact that one person who is maybe subscribing to a bunch of far-right sites and gets a notice like, here's a list, copy and paste this list, go to your library and challenge these books that the librarians have discovered oftentimes the people challenging them have no idea what they're about. They've never read them, but they saw on the internet that these are the books that they're supposed to be protesting, so they do.
Yep. Yeah, it's very viral, and oftentimes, well, the majority of people who are challenging these books haven't read them, right? Like you said, they're looking at a list or a website or something posted on social media, and then they're just turning around and saying, we have to get rid of these books are bad. They don't even know what's inside of them. It used to be, before this this current wave of censorship that we're seeing, it used to be that when we thought about book banning, we thought about a concerned parent or community member in a community going to the library and seeing one book, or reading one book and thinking, wow, this book is problematic. We need to talk about this. But now what you're seeing is outside organizations coming into communities and saying, you have to get rid of these 100 books, these 200 books. And nobody who's challenging the books has even opened the cover of a single one of them.
One of the things that I know that libraries were talking about doing is that rather than allowing one person to come in and fill out a form and list 500 books, that they were thinking of making a requirement that every book somebody wanted to challenge, not just for their family, but for everybody, that there should be a form that they have to fill out and questions they have to answer. When did you read the book? What specifically about this book, is offensive? Because if somebody came into the library and was given 500 pieces of paper and say, okay, get to it, that would really slow down this whole effort. It's like the voter suppression that took place in Georgia. They had a handful of people challenging the validity of like more than 30,000 signatures that were supposed to be then removed from the voter rolls. And Greg Palast talked to one of these people who had done the challenge, and he was like, do you know Jeffrey Smith? And the person was like, no. And he was like, you don't know who Jeffrey Smith is? And the person was like, no. Well, then why did you challenge his signature? Why did you say he's not a legitimate voter? And then it came to light, same thing, was given a list and told what to do with it.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because we've seen situations where people have said to the book challengers, okay, let's go and read each of these books and discuss them. And when people actually go and read the books, they say, oh, now that I've read the book, I don't have a problem with it. Like, or this was actually a really great book. I would actually want my children to read this book, or want, the community to have access to this book. And you're completely right about the administrative burden that these types of book challenges have on libraries and have on communities. If somebody gives a list of 500 books to a library and says, we have to review all 500 of these books, that slows down and destroys library services for the whole community, because the amount of work that it takes to do a thoughtful, thorough, deliberate book review is, it takes time and consideration and deliberation. So it also overtasks and wastes a lot of taxpayer money, and decreases library services for everyone.
Sarah, we need to take a break. I'm speaking with Sarah Lambden, Executive Director of the American Library Association. Challenges to books, school libraries or public libraries, they have not gone away. We are going to talk more about that when we come right back after a break.
You're listening to WCPT 820, because facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
With me is Sarah Lambden, Executive Director of the American Library Association, ALA, Executive Director of the Freedom to Read Foundation. There are a number of measures that lawmakers are considering that would make it a lot easier to get rid of books, especially in school libraries. You were just talking, Sarah, about the fact that sometimes if they actually have to read the books that they're challenging, sometimes they realize that there's really nothing offensive about the book. I decided a year or two ago that I was going to focus on reading all of the most banned books. And I started with Gender Queer, which is a book that was on lists year after year after year. And so I bought it, and I thought, oh my God, this is probably going to be full of sex from the start to the end. I mean, why else would it be on so many lists? And I read it. Gender Queer is a memoir. It's the story of one human being entering adolescence, working through adolescence, and trying to figure out sexuality. And, I like to wear, these kind of clothes. What does that mean? I like this. Does that mean something else? And it was a very tender, loving example of the person's journey, thinking about things, what fits, what doesn't, how do I fit in, where do I have a label, what label? And I finished it, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me that this is frequently a banned book, because I thought it was a beautiful story of someone coming of age and working through all that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things to keep in mind about libraries is librarians are experts at collection development, and they don't just pick books willy-nilly, right? They really, like, shelf space is limited. To have your book appear in a library means that it has been reviewed, it has been loved, people have recommended it, it oftentimes has won awards, like Gender Queer has won awards. So these award-winning special books end up on the library shelves. And the idea that every book has its reader is something that we think about a lot, because libraries are there to serve the whole community. And some people might not be interested in reading a book like Gender Queer, but for some people, a book like Gender Queer is a critical lifeline that allows them to see themselves or their friends or their family reflected in something else.
If somebody is struggling through adolescence, this book, sometimes it's just nice to know you're not the only one. I read this book, oh my gosh, I'm not the first person to struggle with some of these questions. And that makes me feel like I'm not so alone.
Yeah. And when you're a young adult or a child, seeing yourself, whether it's your religion or the type of family you have or the type of traditions that you hold dear, seeing that in somebody else's story is really meaningful and important.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I posted on Blue Sky a link to you have like you've created a web address where people can click the link and they can make their voices heard. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so we have this wonderful venue where you can talk directly to your lawmakers. So if you there's like a call to action, there's texts that you can use to talk to your lawmakers, but you can also edit it to add your own personal stories or however you'd like. And those emails, those messages go directly to your lawmakers, based on your address. And we are actively asking lawmakers to not support these censorship bills, like Senate Bill Senate Bill 4925, right? And instead, we're asking lawmakers to support bills that would fund libraries and that would support schools and education, like the freedom to read laws and the funding bills that would fund the Institute for Museum and Library Sciences, the E-rate bill that ensures that people have access to online resources and can connect to the internet. So these things that allow us to get information and to search and to, gather knowledge and learn. There are bills that would support those things instead of focusing our energy on removing information and censoring information and banning books.
If you guys want to find this link on my Blue Sky account, it's at joanesposito.bsky.social. And you can just click on the link. It is also if you have a pencil or a pen, action.ala.org. And it's very clear. Here's what's going on. Here's what you can do about it. Click here. It is very, very user friendly. And I think it is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning for local Chicagoans. Senator Jack Reed actually is sponsoring a bill right now called the Right to Read Act. It's Senate Bill 3365. And you can ask your lawmakers to support bills like that would make sure that libraries are well staffed, well resourced, and remain enduring resources for your community.
Tell me again, what's the Right to Read bill?
The Right to Read Act.
The Right to Read Act. And it's sponsored by whom?
Jack Reed, and in the House, HR 6440 is sponsored by Representative Adelita Grijalva.
Well, you make a good point. Rather than wringing our hands and decrying all of these efforts at censorship, let's get out there and pass our own laws. I mean, that's a brilliant move on lawmakers' part. And sometimes I think we get really frustrated. It seems like we're always on defense. And I think it's time we took action. And I hope that more of that happens. In addition to the website where people can have their voices monitored, have their voices recorded, what else is the ALA doing right now?
We are busy. We've been very active in pushing back against these censorship efforts. So we're not fighting this alone, right? Even today, we have advocates from Unite Against Book Bans. We have library workers, publishers, authors, booksellers, First Amendment advocates on the Hill right now talking to lawmakers and asking them to stand up for the freedom to read and to preserve libraries, schools, and other, writers, artists, and to support their freedom of expression and the right to receive information. So we are on the Hill. We're having direct meetings. We're doing a lot of grassroots mobilizing. So look in your community, see what your friends of the library group are doing, or other freedom to read advocates. Go to your library and check out how find out how you can help your local library. And we are helping to facilitate those kinds of activities all over America. And we're also advocating for alternatives. So there is the Federal Right to Read Act. There are those bills in the House and Senate, but states are passing their own freedom to read and right to read laws. So find out what's going on in your state legislature and whether you can help support the freedom to read in your state's laws.
You know, I never thought of going to my local library and seeing, we have a Friends of the Library. I used to be on the board for it, but frankly, its main goal is fundraising to supplement the library budget. But do you think it's common that most local libraries, if they don't have an organized way for you to help, maybe they know a nearby library organization that does?
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, this may not have been the case, 8 or 9 years ago, but right now there are few libraries out there that aren't being touched by censorship and that wouldn't love local support or haven't already gathered local support. So yeah, now is a great time to go to your library and say, hey, I hear there's been a lot of censorship. Is there anything we can do locally to help? Is there any organization working on this? Because I wouldn't be surprised to hear that the answer is yes, please. And supporting this is another side benefit of supporting libraries in communities where people come out to support their libraries. They find a lot of joy. The states that have had a lot of grassroots organizing, people have said that they really, really enjoy getting together with other people in their communities who love libraries and who are trying to support libraries. Because I don't know if you feel this way. I might be biased because of who I am and what I do. But when I go to a library and when I think about libraries, I think of joy and like wonder and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Like you walk into a library and it is warm and people are gathered around books and ideas. So yeah, I would urge everybody to come out for your libraries wherever you are.
And libraries are more these days than just books. I know we're running out of time, but in addition to like movies and other media, my library actually has seeds. There's a big display where you can take out, quote unquote, like seeds. You want to plant herbs? Oh, take a packet of basil seeds and check it out. And the sign says, look, if you grow something and it makes seeds and you want to bring some back, that would be great. But the libraries are so amazing these days.
Yeah, they really are. And that is in large part because of library workers and librarians. Librarians are just amazing. And they are really there to do that kind of outreach and to create these kind of resources for their communities. Yeah, checking out seeds, checking out museum passes, checking out, and in some communities you can check out like tools and other implements, or they have maker spaces where you can use a 3D printer. Yeah, you'd be amazed by what there is for you in your local library.
Well, thank you so much. I love obviously talking about books. I love talking about libraries, and I really want everybody to help defeat some of these awful measures and support the good ones. Sarah Lambden, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. And yeah, everybody get out there and support libraries.
Sarah's the director of the American Library Association. We are going to take a break and be back with Tom Hartman right after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It is always a delight to welcome Tom Hartman to our show. You hear him every day right before I go on the air. And in addition to the Hartman Report, which should be in your email box every morning, he is a student of history. He writes books. He does everything you can imagine. Tom Hartman does it, and probably does it better than any of us. He has a new book out, Who Killed the American Dream? The Greatest Political Crime Ever Told, and is here to talk about that and other things. Tom, welcome back to my show, and thank you for everything you do to put CPT on the map.
Hey, Joan. Well, thank you for inviting me back. I always love talking with you. Thank you.
I read, I got, is the book out? I got a proof that I've been reading. Okay.
Yeah, it came out on July 7th.
When I first started reading the first like 3 or 4 paragraphs, I was like, oh my God, how did this happen? And I love the way you say this is both a detective story and a true crime investigation. First of all, let's start at the beginning. A Supreme Court ruling that apparently took place in 1886 that made corporations persons under the 14th Amendment. Did it happen or didn't it?
It didn't, but everybody thinks it did. It's interesting. I wrote a book about this in 2002 called Unequal Protection: How Corporations Became Persons. But it was real academic. Back then I was not on the radio, and I wasn't, I was kind of thinking, I kind of wrote it for lawyers. And because I had just like personally discovered this. I went into the Vermont Law Library back in, right around then, maybe 2001, 2000, whatever the year was before we moved. And because I wanted to read, I had always heard about this case, 1886, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad, that the Supreme Court said corporations are persons. And that was conventional wisdom at the time, by the way. This is 20 years ago. And so I went to the Vermont Law Library and asked Jim Donovan, who was the librarian, and he's also a lawyer, where the original book was. This is the Vermont Law Library is owned by the Vermont Supreme Court. Vermont was an independent republic before it joined the United States. This is one of the oldest law libraries in America. And he had the original book published in 1887 by Bliss and Company. He pulls it off the shelf, blows the dust off it, and opens it up, and we find the decision. And I sat down and I read the whole decision all the way through. It's not very long. And I went back to him and I said, nowhere in this decision does it say corporations are persons. And he's like, well, that's weird. And so he comes over and he sits next to me and we go through it. And he's like, you're right. And so he flips back to the page before the page where the thing starts. And there's this thing called a headnote. And a headnote is a little summary written by the clerk of the court. It has no legal standing whatsoever. It's typically there to help lawyers find things, or for law students, or historians, or whatever. It just summarizes the case. And in the headnote, it said that the Supreme Court Chief Justice Morrison Remick Waite had said from the bench, corporations are persons under the 14th Amendment, under Article 1 of the 14th Amendment. That was literally not part of the decision. But, and I was like, holy cow. And he was holy cow. And so I went down the street to a friend of mine who was a lawyer, and showed him, I got copies of the pages and showed it to him. And he was like, oh, you found something here. So I wrote that book in 2003. And when the book came out, I did a tour of law libraries. And the first one I visited was here in Oregon, actually. It was the Lewis and Clark Law Library. And there's about 300 people in the room, and most of them law students. And there was a couple of professors. And I said, raise your hands if you know that in 1886, the Supreme Court ruled in Santa Clara County that corporations are persons. And everybody raised their hand. Oh. Now, it's 20 years later, and my initial book has kind of worked its way. In fact, it's used as a textbook in some schools. It's kind of worked its way through the legal ecosystem. And so nowadays, if you ask that question, most people actually know the answer. But the general public never got it. And so I rewrote that book essentially as a murder mystery, and that's this book. But it's written in a way that just anybody who has no legal background whatsoever can understand. And it explains, why corporations are running our lives, why they're screwing us constantly, why they own our politicians, why we can't get legislation passed that we want, et cetera. I'm sorry, you asked me what time it was, and I told you how to build a clock. That was way too long.
No, please. I love when you give me the background. That's a fascinating part, is how you stumbled upon this. And so you're saying that now, at least most lawyers know that this wording was actually not part of the final ruling that was written up by the court.
That's right, and that's what you'll find on Wikipedia now too. And although it's still out there, I mean, I asked a couple of AI programs, when did the Supreme Court rule that corporations are persons? And ChatGPT and Claude said, they didn't, and they kind of gave me my own answer, right? But DuckDuckGo AI said in 1886 in Santa Clara County, so it's still out there.
Wow, that's incredible. This is a little bit off topic, but also when I was reading, let me go back. I think this is the prologue. You talk about how the American dream pretty much ended with, our generation. And that's something that I think about a lot. I think that's part of where we got to where we are today. And, you know, because my father did better than his parents, I did better than my parents, but my kids, I don't think are going to end up doing better than I did. And that used to be what the whole American dream was all about. Talk about that and your family about, and if you would.
Oh yeah, my grandfather was a Norwegian immigrant. He was a cabinet maker. My father worked in a tool and die shop, which was a step up. He had a union job. He was able to buy a house and had, you know, a pension and health insurance his whole life. And I did better than my father. And you know, my kids, you know, thank God, are doing pretty good, but they all have advanced graduate degrees. I mean, you know, one has a PhD and 2 masters, and the other 2 both have, you know, the equivalent of master's degrees, and they're working in their fields. Thank God, you know, because there's still some job opportunities out there. But that's not the normal, you know, because I didn't complete college. I mean, that's not the normal thing, you know. And I think that to be able to have, you know, basically I have, you know, well, I even got kicked out of high school, so I'm not even sure I have a high school education.
Tom Hartman, bad boy.
You know, I got kicked out for publishing an underground newspaper criticizing the administration. They got a court order forbidding me from coming back on high school property. And so I was able to use that. In Michigan at the time, you couldn't take a GED unless you were at least 18. And I was 15 when this happened. And so, or 16. And so I was able to use that to get the permission to take the GED, and then that got me into Lansing Community College. So anyway, long story, but or I guess it's a short story. But the point is that it used to be that with that kind of an education, you know, maybe a year of college or something like that, or even just a high school diploma, you could do well in America, and that's just increasingly no longer the case. It's just so wrong. It's just so
and on top of that, the you know, it used to be, I sound as old as I am, that, you know, there was a certain understanding that if you did go to college and end up with a degree, you were pretty much guaranteed that there would be a job for you. And that is no longer the case.
Right.
You know, and I remember when I was working in television and I would talk to my friends from high school or whatever, and they would be like, you know, well, how does your job work? And I said, well, you know, I have a 3-year contract. And they said, well, what happens at the end of 3 years? I said, well, I either get another contract or I get a different job or I'm out of work. And they were like, oh my God, how can you live with that uncertainty? And it was just, you know, it was part of the business. So you really didn't think twice about it. But now everybody lives with that uncertainty. I mean, you can be a CPA for a corporation, and suddenly they decide they've got to, you know, lay 5% of the workforce out. You know, my dad worked for Sears Roebuck and Company his whole life, and that wasn't so unusual with my dad's generation. You know, you start with a company and you stay with a company, and they take care of you. You advance through the ranks. But the world we live in now, it's like everybody is on the bubble. It seems like most of the time.
Yeah, it's really true. And in large part, what has happened is that our economy, and, you know, I would argue our nation, but our economy in particular has been basically reordered to the benefit of the very wealthy and of corporations. And much of what allows this to happen, that made all this possible, is this obscene Supreme Court decision, or this head note that within 10 years, after, here's the story in short form. The clerk of the court, John Chandler Bancroft Davis, was a former railroad executive, CEO, and his father, and he was very, very wealthy. His father was the governor of Massachusetts, and he was a real big shot. And one of the justices, Stephen Field, was being paid off by the Southern Pacific Railroad, and they said that they were going to help him become president in 1896 or 1892 if he would do this for them. And so Field and Bancroft Davis got together and put this into the head note. And at the time, Morris Durham McWade, who was the Chief Justice of the court, who was inappropriately quoted, shall we say, this was 1886. He died in 1887. He had congestive heart failure. He was hardly there he was there for the case, but he never even saw the words that they had put in his mouth. I mean, he was dead by the time it was published. But what happened was the railroads hired the, I'm forgetting the guy's name, Conklin. There was a guy named Conklin who was a congressman, and there was a senator. I'm forgetting his name. He hired and they were on the committee that wrote the 14th Amendment, which says that all persons in the United States shall have access to due process and equal, equality under the law, essentially, and equal protection under the law. And it says persons. It doesn't say natural persons, which is humans, and it doesn't say artificial persons, which is what a corporation is. It has to have some personhood standing in order to pay taxes and sign contracts and things. So the railroads hired them, and for a decade they traveled around the country, going to state legislators and whatnot, telling people that they had originally intentionally written the 14th Amendment with just the word person rather than the phrase natural person, specifically to include corporations. That was their intention. And so in 1892, I think it was, the Supreme Court ruled on another case that was not related to this case, but it was related to corporations, and they quoted that head note. And so that case actually became the legal precedent. That was when actually the Supreme Court actually did rule that corporations were persons. And then it kind of sat like a landmine, or a hand grenade that nobody had pulled the pin on, that was just sitting under the dirt, right up until the Reagan era. And then, the Reagan people, John Roberts was in the Reagan Justice Department, and he was writing all these papers for Reagan about how we can reform the justice system and take control, how conservatives can take control of the court and everything else. And they said, holy cow, look at this, let's do something with this. And that, you had two decisions in the 70s, Buckley and Bellotti, that were sort of based on, the Bellotti decision was actually written in 1978 by Lewis Powell himself, and it cites the head note in Santa Clara. And then, of course, John Roberts, his court passed Citizens United, which again cites that head note and says, corporations are persons, and because they don't have mouths, but because they're persons under the Constitution, they're entitled to the First Amendment right of free speech, and because they don't have a mouth, they're going to have to use money as their mouth, and so money is free speech.
Oh, that was the reason.
That's where it all came from. And it all came from this one lie that was built into this head note in the Supreme Court case, so that Stephen J. Field could become president someday, which never happened.
Okay, but you're saying, like, with the word getting out, with you writing that first book, with you talking to legal organizations, now they understand that the head note was not actually part of the decision, but Citizens United, you said, actually cited the head note?
That's right, yeah, and as did the Buckley decision in 1978, which was, at that time, there was a Massachusetts law that said corporations couldn't put money into campaigns, and the First National Bank sued Mr. Bellotti, who was the Attorney General, and the Supreme Court overturned that Massachusetts law, and thus overturned all those laws all across the United States, and suddenly corporations were right in the middle of our politics. That was only in 1978, and that was based on the Santa Clara head note. And then that set the stage for Citizens United and for and Snyder and McCutcheon and the things that have followed since then. And by the way, I wasn't the first person to discover this. It was actually discovered after I wrote my first book and started really digging into it. A guy named Jay Graham discovered this in 1956, and he wrote a book about it that just went nowhere. Nobody ever paid any attention to it. He's long dead. The book is long out of print. And then it got picked up again in the 60s and 70s by a few, kind of Bernie Sanders types, people who were doing like pamphlets and things in the legal field. And then right around the time that I was writing my book, Move to Amend came into being. Some other people who knew about this, and they started this MoveToAmend.org organization, which has is proposing a constitutional amendment to basically reverse that head note, to kill the whole thing, root, branch, everything. And, to basically say corporations are not persons under the 14th Amendment or any other part of the Constitution, and which is true, and money is not speech. And so MoveToMed.org is doing great work in this area, and I cite their work and they cite my work. And in the book, I even quote their amendment and tell people to get behind what they're doing. But they're not the only ones. Public Citizen, the group that Ralph Nader started, has been all over this for about a decade now, too.
I'm talking with Tom Hartman. He has a new book out, Who Killed the American Dream. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Hey, it's Joan Esposito, and I want to tell you about 120 Life. 120 Life is a drink made with ingredients that help support healthy blood pressure. My mom struggled with high blood pressure for much of her adult life, and for many of us, high blood pressure runs in the family. 120 Life is a great tasting fruit and vegetable drink designed to improve blood pressure. Put it to the test for a couple of weeks. Check your blood pressure. See if it works for you. Some people reported results in as little as 2 weeks. And I like it because I like a fruit drink that isn't overly sugary. To try it, go online to 120life.com. That's 120life.com. If your high blood pressure doesn't come down in 2 weeks, you can get a full refund, and you can get a 20% discount. Use the code JOAN, Joan, for 20% off your order. These statements have not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joining me is radio host Tom Hartman. He has a new book out, Who Killed the American Dream. And, you know, Tom, one of the things that I'm getting really tired of in most instances are these conservatives who go back to the founding fathers and they make all these assumptions about what they want. They wanted us to be a white Christian nationalist country and all these other things. Let's go to Chapter 7, What the Founders Knew. I would like you to talk about that.
Okay, well, let me hang on just a second. Let me look at Chapter 7 here. it's page 66. Okay.
Yes, about around the time of yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, first of all, and I tell the whole story in the book of the Boston Tea Party, which was arguably the event that kicked off the American Revolution in 1773. In early 1773, Thomas Jefferson published this pamphlet called a summary of the rights of British Americans, or a summary view of rights of British Americans. And it was a pamphlet to his fellow colonists about how to be a good British citizen in the American colonies. Jefferson wrote this. And then that fall, you had the Boston Tea Party. And the Boston Tea Party was where the biggest corporation on earth, the East India Company, British East India Company, was in a financial crisis. There was a recession in 1771. And so they got this biggest tax break in history from the British government that allowed them to wipe out the small tea sellers in New England and the smugglers and everybody else, all the importers. And it was like a giant Walmart move. And that's why those guys went out and threw that tea into the harbor. It was a protest. It was the first protest against a massive corporation. So, and that was the thing that caused Jefferson to change his mind and decide to hell with it. We're gonna separate ourselves from Great Britain, and not just Jefferson. I mean, pretty much everybody else. You know, it was the Boston Tea Party, and then that was followed by the shot heard around the world and all that sort of thing. But the word corporation does not exist in the Constitution. It's nowhere, because they saw corporations as dangerous things, as ways that wealthy people accumulated wealth. Well, the British East India Company at that time ran India. They had a corporation that was running a country and bleeding it dry, by the way, in the process. And so Jefferson, he said, this is something Jefferson wrote. He said, "I hope we shall crush in its birth the aristocracy of our moneyed corporations, which dare already to challenge our government to a trial of strength and bid defiance to the laws of our country." I mean, that was like when he was president, in 1800 or 1801. James Madison, in Federalist number 10, he warns about this. He goes off on it. I mean, individual states, they heavily regulated corporations. Corporations regularly got the corporate death penalty. In most states in the United States, up until after the Civil War, a corporation could not live for more than 20 years. They couldn't live forever. Corporations had to operate within the public benefit. And they were constantly getting the death penalty for basically being too greedy, for not serving the public good. So, throughout most of the 19th century, that was very much the case. And it only really changed in the late 1880s, 1890s, when this new vision was promulgated by Bancroft Bancroft Davis and Stephen J. Field.
I didn't realize that corporations had like a term limit.
They did
originally. That seems like a good idea.
Yeah. Well, what you had to do, let's say that you had a business that was really prospering, and you hit your 20-year limit. At that point, what you have to do is dissolve the corporation and basically reincorporate. And that gives everybody an opportunity to reevaluate everything that's been going on in the company. It gives new people an opportunity to buy into it. And there's real state regulation. I think we should go back to something like that, frankly. But I think
because I think one of the things that I think there's a lot of things that have promoted wealth inequality, which I think is a real danger. But we seem to see more and more companies buying up other companies and, becoming these mega corporations that have all these different interests and all these different political needs. And I don't think that's healthy. I don't think, maybe it's healthy for the shareholders, but I don't think it's healthy for the countries they exist in.
Well, and if the shareholders want to live in a functioning democracy, it's not healthy for them either. I mean, the very simple reason about why do we not have a national health care program? Why are we the only developed country in the world without a national health care program? Because you've got big insurance companies that make a fortune off our dysfunctional system. And according to Citizens United and according to the 1886, they can own politicians, basically. They can buy, why don't we have, why isn't Social Security being strengthened right now? I mean, why wasn't it done 20 years ago? Because you got big banks that want to lay their hands on that money. Why don't we have cheap pharmaceuticals? Because the big pharmaceutical company, in every single case, I mean, why can't kids go to college, without ending up with a mortgage-sized debt? Again, because of the big banks. They make all their money on this thing. In fact, in 2005, they passed that bill that said that you can't go bankrupt on an educational loan. It's illegal now. So these are like total zero risk loans for the banks. And so name a societal ill in America. The housing thing. You've got the giant corporations who bought up all these houses after the crash in 2008, 2009, created a housing shortage. I can't think, literally, Joan, I can't think of a single social, cultural, economic ill in America that you cannot track back to a corporation corrupting our political process. And the ability of corporations to corrupt our political process literally started with that decision that head note in 1886 and that decision in 2010, Citizens United.
One thing, this is a little bit off topic here. You were talking about healthcare and why we don't have a national healthcare program. I remember when the ACA was first passed, Joe Lieberman was the single vote that killed the public option, which would have been very much like Medicare for all. And I've never been able, I've read a lot about Joe Lieberman, but I've never felt I had a good grasp for, did he get lots of donations from the insurance industry? I mean, why would he kill that? Do you know?
Yeah. Yes. Two of the largest health insurance companies in the world are headquartered in Connecticut, and he represented Connecticut. And the health insurance industry had been a major donor to him and his campaign throughout his life. And so when he killed that, he was paying off the people who'd been paying him, who helped put him into office.
I guess I understand. I think what we see in political life so much is, well, yes, I have these beliefs and I have this moral compass, but I'm really the best person to be in this seat. So if I have to kind of let my ethics slide once in a while to make sure I get reelected, isn't that really the most important thing that could possibly happen? It just feels like that's the story over and over again. I think that's, and maybe they're right. Maybe if they would risk, being thrown out of office.
You're identifying a broken system. You're identifying a broken system. And what this book does is describes how that system got broken and how we can fix it.
We don't have much time left. Give us a brief note on, is there anything that my listeners right now, right here could do?
Oh, yeah. You've got a bunch of politicians who are working toward a constitutional amendment or legislation that would overturn Citizens United. And, we just need to identify those politicians. They are the ones who are not on the take, basically, which is mostly the Progressive Caucus. It's about 100 members of the House and a handful of senators. And just, and get more and more of those kind of people in there, and literally start at the local level. I mean, look for people running for the city council who refuse to take corporate money, the state legislature, county board of commissioners. I mean, at every level, we need to be working with and for politicians who believe that it's time to get corporate money and billionaire money, for that matter, which is essentially the same thing by and large, out of politics. It is the cancer at the core of American society.
I definitely agree with you on that.
Democracy.
Thom Hartmann's new book is out. You can pick it up. Who Killed the American Dream? Tom, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Oh, Joan, it's always such a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Take care. We are going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Hey, where's Hal Sparks? I'm not sure where he is now, but I know where you can find him Saturdays at 11. He'll be right here on WCPT 820 for the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
I am very happy to welcome back to our show David Layman, longtime newsman from many different anchor chairs across the country, news manager, political observer, political pundit, media trainer. He's done it all. David, how are you?
I also do dishes.
Do you? That's good to know.
Doing great. It's blue skies here in San Diego.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. It's always blue skies. Just be quiet. Nobody wants to hear that. I want to talk to you about something that's not newsy or not political.
Sure.
You did a very interesting vacation that you've recently gotten back from. It wasn't like just going to a beach and having a bunch of umbrella drinks or going to an urban area and visiting all the museums. You basically drove across country to reconnect with family and friends who'd been a part of your life in different times of your life. And I thought that was so fascinating. For older folks like us, one of the main things we can do to stay fresh is to make sure that we stay connected to people, that we have conversations with people, that we talk with people of a diverse group of people, all ages. And you just basically did that sort of thing, reconnecting with your life. What prompted that, and what did you get out of that?
I had what I'd have to be describing as a phenomenal vacation. It was somewhat harried in the planning of it because I was doing what I refer to as speed dating with my old friends. I would see one for breakfast, then I'd fly over to another location, meet another one at noon, fly over to another location, not fly, literally drive to another location, and I would see somebody for dinner. And I did that for the better part of my vacation. Not every day, obviously, but I did that a lot. There was another unique feature which I'll mention to you that you probably didn't pick up. I also did something that I've been doing all of my life, all of my adult life. I also went back and visited ex-girlfriends. Friends of mine say, Dave, why in the world do you go back and see ex-girl? I mean, I've been doing this for years. I mean, this is not new, but this time I actually met up with, I think, maybe three ex-girlfriends, because the way my life worked out with the death of my mother when I was 16, and then, life got a little bit complicated after that as well. I really finally figured out the reason several years ago why I do this and nobody else seems to do it. These people became not just the people that I dated for extended periods of time, but people who really became my family. I became part of their family. And while we separated and went different ways, they have remained friends. And I've kept in touch with a couple of others as well. I didn't get married, by the way, till I was 48, so that might give you a little bit of context about my history. But, so I met a lot of these people, and, one of them had just gone through the death of her husband. He was a attorney for the Justice Department and later worked for NATO, and several others. I won't go into the details of it, but I've always stayed connected with these people, as unusual as that is to most other quote unquote normal people. But I think as you get older, I'm now, I'm coming up to 82 years of age in November. And, you start to think about the time you have remaining, and you say, well, I'm not going to be able to see Mary or Joe or Frank or whatever. I'll do that the next trip. Well, the next trip, they may die or you may die, and you don't have a chance to do that. So I make it a point to stay connected with people, broadcasting people that I spent 2 days with my ex-boss at his compound up in New Hampshire. Had a lovely time with him. I saw some people in Rhode Island who I was colleagues with in the news business. So, it was a confraternity from many, many sources, if you will. And so I've done that. I did it in about 2.5 weeks. I flew from here in San Diego to St. Louis, where I grew up most of my life. And then I went to Philadelphia, where I grew up as a baby until I was 8, and saw relatives there. And, everybody is going through transitions. And so it's also a fascinating conversation, even if they were strangers. But they're not strangers. Obviously, they're dear friends of mine. So that's how I spent my vacation. And years ago, just to show you, I do take unusual vacations. I spent a week in what was then the Soviet Union. Who goes to the Soviet Union for a vacation?
Yeah.
But I went there on an educational bent that I was interested in to kind of experience the old Soviet Union. So anyway, that's what I did on my vacation.
Well, I think that's something that more of us, you get so busy with life, and, you've got kids and you've got going in a different direction all the time. And sometimes it's real easy to let those, what were previously pretty important relationships, just kind of go by the wayside. And I agree with you about the exes. My feeling is that if somebody was a good enough person that you really cared about them, just because the relationship doesn't work out doesn't mean they I suppose they could do some terrible things. That might be different. But if you just, if you just grew apart or the relationship comes apart for other reasons, they're still a good person. And, you do share some history. A few years ago, there was a big radio convention, a reunion for one of the old rock stations. And I happen to know, well, first of all, my first husband worked at that station, plus another bunch of radio DJs that I knew worked there. And I got in touch with my ex-husband, and I was like, you know what, let's have lunch. And so we made plans to have lunch, and his wife had been in town, and I was like, I can't wait to meet your wife. He goes, well, she's actually got to go home a couple days early, so it'll probably just be me and the guys. And then it showed up, and it was just him. And I said, where are the other folks? He goes, I think they were afraid to be privy to this conversation between you and me. They were like, oh, no, you better do that by yourself. You better do that by yourself. And we had a delightful time, and we had a lot of laughs. And it didn't work out with him and me, but but he's still a smart, funny guy, and it was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful.
Those are the things that attracted to you to him in the first place. So that hasn't really changed, and so that's what makes it an enjoyable conversation, as opposed to a recounting of your separation or whatever.
And the other thing I admire is that I think especially with our generation,
Yeah.
It's really difficult for men to have friendships.
You're right.
You know, I mean, a guy gets married and then the wife and the kids become his whole life. And I see it happen over and over again, you know, that there's nobody to pal around with. There's no guy nights.
Right.
There's no, hey, I want to go to this concert, you know, you want to go with me kind of things. And I think that's really sad.
Well, it is, and I think women do. You know, we're going to turn this into a CNN talk show thing before we get going here. I think women are really, really much better at communicating with each other than men are with each other. Men will talk about the World Cup. They'll talk about the football when the season comes around. I find that most men do not get into really deep conversations with each other. It's considered to be kind of effeminate, or maybe it's a little bit too revealing, or they're afraid they're going to say something.
Men aren't supposed to have feelings.
Yeah.
You know, I think that for our generation, you know, having feelings was not necessarily encouraged for men.
No, it wasn't. And I think that lives on with people of a certain age who are now in their elder years. They're not used to that. And there's another aspect of this, too, as well. When I was growing up, I was deeply religious. I was Catholic. I was head of the altar boys. You know, God, the church was the center of my life. And that has changed a good deal since I was, you know, in college. And so if you don't have a church connection, or if you don't belong to a country club, or if you don't play golf, those are some of the primary ways that men kind of quote unquote keep in touch. I would vouch a lot of money on this, that I will bet you a lot of men who play golf on a regular basis probably tell a lot of funny jokes. They probably talk about the game, but I'll bet most of them don't talk with any intensity about their feelings. I think that they may occasionally talk about my wife, what a pain in the butt she is, you know, whatever. But that's not, you know, that's not revealing at all, except that it's rather superficial, if you ask me. So I think men, and also many people don't go to church anymore, and so you don't have the church connection. If your wife dies, you know, now what do? You know, I know in my marriage, my wife was really the primary social contact for me. I was working, as you know, you were a news anchor. I would work from 2 p.m, sometimes even earlier, and I'd get home after midnight. And so all of the friends that I had, when I'm going to work, they're ready to come on home, or they're ready to go out and have a drink after work. Well, drink after work at 6 o'clock, I'm on the news, or 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, depending upon the time zone, I'm on the news. And so I had, I think, a kind of an unusual set of circumstances, given the fact that I had an early death with my mother passing when I was 16, and a career
and then a very
me,
difficult childhood.
Yeah, well, I was past the childhood thing. I was okay on that, but just life gets a little chaotic when mom has left this world, and so then go into the military, and that isolates you because you meet a whole bunch of people you never met before. You're with them for a while, then you're not. You're always meeting new people, and you know this from anchoring. You move into a community, you're the stranger now, but you have to make yourself a friend of that community, or you won't last very long as a news anchor. So you're always on the move. You're always having to prove yourself and so forth. And so I think without having a whole lot of family around, moving around as I did, and to some extent the way you did, I didn't really have roots. And so, that's one of the things you kind of give up when you go into broadcasting, at least if you're an itinerant news anchor, as I was. I call it the last of the white-collar migratory workers. The whole things that affected me, and not getting married till I was 48, I think that really had an awful lot to do with how girlfriends who were really good people, all were terrific people. I never had a bad breakup with any of the people that I dated. And I dated, not that this is about my, Dave Layman, this is your life, but this is really the way that I went through life. And these people that I dated for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they became primary people in my life. They replaced the aunts and uncles that were not around me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyway, most of the audience probably can't identify with most of what I've just laid out here, but I found it fascinating that you thought that was an interesting vacation approach.
Because I think it's so important. It's something people talk about, they never do, and those connections keep you young. Dare I say? They keep you looking outside yourself in a better way. Okay.
Well, also you got to factor in the age element too. We're older now. I think we tend to be a bit more reflective than when we were maybe in our 30s or 40s. So I'll just mention that as well.
Yeah. We are going to take a break. We have news of the day to talk about when we come back. Maybe David Layman knows where Mitch McConnell is. Who knows? We'll ask him when we come right back after this.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
And I am joined by newsman David Layman. Before we went to break, somewhat facetiously, I said maybe he knows where Mitch McConnell is. But there's a larger issue here. And the larger issue is, we had with Tom Keene, a Republican congressman who disappeared, literally disappeared for, I believe it was 117 days, missed more than 100 votes, and nobody knew. Nobody knew where he was. There was the Republican, I think she was a congresswoman who nobody could find. Turned out she was in a memory care facility. Now we have these pictures of Mitch McConnell, who supposedly really isn't very sick or has very few problems, and yet he's been in the hospital for over a month. And all we've seen is one photograph that even some Republicans think is AI. This is such a weird time. What do you think Andy Beshear should do? Because a lot of people are saying that the governor should just go forward and say, you know what? Show me proof of life. Have Mitch give me a call because I don't think he's around, and I'm calling a special election.
Well, I think that probably would be a little bit of an overkill, at least at the outset. Here's the problem with this. And as you pointed out, this has happened on a couple of occasions. A lot of them are doing this because they want to remain private. Well, guess what? When you signed up to run for a campaign, you just gave up virtually all of your privacy except for when you go to the bathroom. Okay, that's just the deal you make with the devil when you run for political office. And I know that because I have worked for people outside of my news experience. I've worked with candidates and so forth. And you tell them, look, there really is no such thing as long-term privacy. There is between you and your wife and that sort of thing. I don't mean to misstate that. But when it comes to the public, they elected you. You were responsible. You said, I'm here to do your work. If you're not doing their work, you need to owe somebody a damn explanation as to why you're not on the job. Because guess what? Mitch McConnell is still taking home his probably $200,000 a year while he's at a recovery. By the way, I did check during the commercial to see where the heck he is, and he's in a recovery thing. But for him to come out of it and to I don't know whether that was your summary that doesn't seem to be a whole lot wrong with him, but he's been in the hospital for a month. I don't know whether he would agree with that statement.
Well, this is the statement. Remember when he was still the first picture that was released, and he said, I fell, and they've done a bunch of tests to figure out why I've fallen, but it's, not a stroke, not heart, and I have a touch of pneumonia. Well, as you and I know, if you're an older person, a hospital is a dangerous place to be for an extended period of time because of hospital-acquired infections. If he was that, they're just doing a bunch of why couldn't that be done on an outpatient basis?
Absolutely. And let me ask you a rhetorical question. When was the last time you ever heard of a hospital say, yeah, stay around for a month or so?
Yeah, really.
They want to get you out of there. If they don't want to get you out of there for infection purposes, and also because you're running up the cost, your insurance company, or I don't know who insures, I guess the federal government insures these people, but they want you out of the hospital because you're costing them a lot of money the longer you're there. I mean, the average, if you go to an emergency room these days, just going to the emergency room is somewhere, if they run some tests, you're talking about $15,000 just to be in an emergency room that they run a bunch of tests. If you're there for 30 days or whatever, I mean, this doesn't make any sense. I think there was much more serious stuff going on here, and he's being private about it because he doesn't want people who already thinks he's overstayed his visit in the Senate. He ought to give it up and go on with the rest of his life for as long as he has. But to me, this is just a matter of common sense. You know, you're sick, you have problems, you tell people you got them, and I'm going to get back to work as soon as I can, and I'll keep you updated. Keep you updated. This guy is the Senate leader, for crying out loud.
Yep. It does. The whole thing is very, very suspicious. So you don't think, because Andy Bashir already said, I want proof of life, and then we got that picture. But, if indeed he's at a rehab facility, why couldn't Andy Bashir give him a call? Why couldn't he give Andy Bashir a call? Seems the whole thing seems very, very odd and not in a good way.
Is. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's more to this story, and it will come out because somebody will tell the story, at some point. But you know what? I don't like to spend my life thinking about what's wrong with Mitch McConnell. I'd rather be thinking about policy that he ought to be working on, or his members of the Senate ought to be working on things, and not have this not silly. It's more serious than that. We shouldn't be obsessing about this when there are bigger fish to fry with, a war going on, reversing energy standards and things like that really do have a much broader public scope to them in terms of affecting the people who elect these people to Congress.
Yep. We need to take a break. I'm speaking with longtime newsman David Layman. We will be back with more right after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joining me is longtime newsman David Layman, and you made reference briefly to the Iran war, which I feel like almost ended. It was so close. There was a memorandum of understanding. There was a ceasefire. Okay, maybe they were still attacking our bases, but Trump kept saying, no, that didn't break the ceasefire. That didn't break the ceasefire. That didn't break the ceasefire. And I thought he was just going to continue to say that and we could move on. And now it seems like not only are we back where we started, but we're in worse shape than when we started. What end do you see? How do you see this ending?
Well, I think, let me take you back to just a quick my little attempt at humor. I think Trump saying, we didn't really break that. We didn't really break that. No, that's just a little bombing. I think that came with practice about how he dealt with his marriage vows. No, that didn't really happen. No, that didn't really happen. Yeah. I think Donald Trump is very fast becoming an albatross around the Republican Party's neck. And by the way, I thoroughly am relishing that because it's long overdue. But he, in saying yesterday that he is going to win this war and he's not going to take any political calculation for the upcoming election, midterm elections. Now, if I'm a Republican, I'm going to be scared to death because I've got to live with this guy. I can't criticize him because he'll come and attack me, or if he can, he'll get somebody to run against me because he thinks I'm disloyal because I've said something bad about his war-making policy, which, he did on his own, never got any congressional approval for what he's doing. So I think what he's doing is he's elongating the war, and I think that really is very, very helpful for the Democratic side. It's, I think, going to kill a lot of the Republicans, or some of the Republicans who are, facing election coming up mid-year, just a few months away. And for him to say, I really don't care about the election, I'm going to win this war because it's all about nuclear power. And by the way, I'll probably surprise you, Joan, with this. I absolutely think that Trump has to do something I think he's got to take a tough stand on the war because of the whole crisis of oil. As you know, there's been a side stream, if you will, of oil getting out of the Middle East by going through another pass, which is
Bab el-Mandab.
Yeah, it's a parallel highway, if you will, river highway to the Straits of Hormuz, and now the Houthis are talking about using that as a tourniquet when they feel like doing it. So I think Trump has to fight this war that he created. He's made the huge mess, and now that we're in it, I don't think he can leave there saying, we're going to let them charge 20% tariff on every ship that passes through. If he does that, that just is going to throw the economy into even a greater mess than it already is becoming. So I actually think he has to fulfill this, or I think we're going to be in worse shape. But he's basically created this mess, and now he's got to solve it, even though he doesn't have the support of the American people.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I agree with you completely, because it is a situation that is degrading. And supposedly Iran was sort of like egging the Houthis on. Hey, by the way, you guys could close that strait over there. And, I just don't understand what is going to get Iran to negotiate with us. I mean, he's been attacking infrastructure. He's been attacking civilian targets, which is supposed to be a big no-no. And it just seems to be escalating.
It's illegal under international law for you to blow up infrastructure that affects the public directly. So that's actually illegal. That's a war crime he's looking at doing.
Yeah. So, but what is it that's going to take? What is the carrot or the stick that is going to get Iran to sign off even on another memorandum of understanding?
Yeah, but that memorandum of understanding was nothing. I mean, that could have been written on the back of an envelope. I hate to say it, and I'm not skilled in diplomacy, as you probably can tell. But that was so thin and so breakable as to be laughable, frankly. So,
but it gave him cover. He could say, look, there's an agreement. Yeah. Okay, walking away, moving on.
Well, he said there was an agreement, but there was no agreement. All it was something, we'll talk about this further and we'll cease fire. But, then the ceasefire didn't last. And so they were basically, it's almost like a fig leaf, frankly. Somebody he could say, we're winding this war up. Now, how many times has he said that? Yep. He has said that over and over and over again, and it only gets worse from here on. And I think the lesson here, I think if you get up in the helicopter 35,000 feet in the air, you look down on this mess that he's created, I think the lesson learned is have a new appreciation for diplomacy, because everybody thought, well, diplomacy takes a long time. They're just, playing hidey-tidy, kissy-kissy, and nothing really comes out until, 3 years later or 5 years later when they finally do something they could have done 3 years earlier. The fact of the matter is you've got so many competing interests with the Middle East, with China, and obviously with the Russians, that this stuff does take skilled people who are trained professional diplomats to keep grinding through the hard times to come to an agreement that can be done. The lesson here is Donald Trump does everything on a whim. You can't be the president of the most powerful country in the world and doing things on a whim. You know, they knew, you know, the skilled diplomats, and this was all part of their talking points. This whole thing with the Straits of Hormuz didn't come out of nowhere. They knew that this was always going to be a vulnerability, that Iran could do this. They've got only 26 miles in width there for the ships to come and go with the oil that fuels the world, and they could tighten that up any time. But so could other countries along the route there, even though, you know, the Straits of Hormuz get a little wider before they get very narrow. Other countries could have done the same thing. What would stop other countries, except many of them are now our friends, what would stop them from doing the same thing? I think Trump has really got to slam them in ways that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Because otherwise, you know, you're rewarding really bad behavior, which isn't bad behavior. It's going to send the entire world economy into a huge mess.
There's a University of Chicago professor by the name of Robert Pape, and he's written extensively about something that he calls the escalation trap, where you do something to try to like bring it to a close, only it doesn't work. So then you have to do a little bit more, and that doesn't work. And then you have to do a little bit more and do a little bit more. And,
you're right.
And you can't, once you're committed, because you want this to be over, you want to win, but you know, you tried this thing and it doesn't work. So okay, got to try that thing, and that doesn't work. Let's add this to the mix. And that is my fear. I do not want to see boots on the ground here for this conflict. I think that would just be so awful. Your thoughts?
Well, having been in the military for 3 years, I was an artillery officer, combat arms, you know, one of the most dangerous positions. I never saw any combat, so I don't want to misrepresent my background. But I was trained in artillery, which is the big guns that can kill a lot of people at one time. When you're talking about boots on the ground there, Iran, most people probably don't really pay attention to this sort of thing as those of us who in the news and the journalism community do. Iraq is a huge country. It's mountainous. I mean, it makes other countries in that area look like, you know, little villages.
You mean Iran? You said Iraq. I think you mean Iran.
I meant Iran. I meant Iran. Yeah, it's huge, and the Iranians have gone to a great deal of effort to hide their plutonium and to deeply bury it. Even our big bombs that they call
bunker busters.
The bunker busters. They can't do that. They can make a big mess where you can't really get to it, but those people will be able to get to it after a while. You just bring heavy equipment and pull it out, and there you are. I think Trump really doesn't know what the hell he's doing. I think that's simply a matter of this.
Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, apparently our chief negotiators. Pete Hegseth, our lunatic Secretary of Defense. Who does?
And none of them have any experience. Hegseth, he was in the military. So was I. But am I a diplomat? Am I capable of going in and negotiating, a very complicated deal with all of these countries? I mean, every country that we deal with, we're even dealing with some of our enemies to help them get to these guys so we can work something out. And we don't even agree with most of the people we're asking to be our negotiators.
Yep.
So it's just a horrible mess. And I'll go back to my single point. This is a horrible mess because Donald Trump is undisciplined in his life. He is undisciplined in his thinking. And now he is involved in the deaths of 17 Americans. And there will be more deaths if this escalates. And we don't have enough military to go in to really do a full boots on the ground that you would require to do, because this is such a huge country, and I'm not sure we really know where everything is there. It's a very secretive situation. So boots on the ground, I don't think will do it. I think if he does that, I think he knows he's really asking for big trouble for the party, because, he will be violating everything he said. I'll solve any war in 24 hours.
No more forever wars.
No more forever wars. Welcome to Trump.
Yeah. He is so undisciplined, and he does seem to be more interested in his ballroom than he is in what's going on in Iran. He has no really experienced advisors around him, or, as you said, any negotiators. So I don't know. I have a feeling that MBS from Saudi Arabia is going to have to step in and say, dude, we're going to wrap this up, and here's how it's going to happen. It seems like it's going to have to be an outside influence, because the inside influences are kind of lacking.
Well, and to your point, he really has cuddled up to the head of Saudi Arabia, and now he's talking about giving Saudi Arabia some blueprints for nuclear weapons.
Well, he's already signed a 30-year deal to allow them to enrich uranium. That's already signed and done.
I know, and they're talking about going further with that, according to the New York Times today. Now, MBS is not exactly our good friend. I mean, normally he would be considered an enemy, but he's a friend now because he represents an oil kingdom that we don't rely on as we did in the 1970s, but they still carry a good deal of weight with the OPEC and the oil community. And so now also when he's not killing journalists or killing people on, as he did with the journalist several years ago, this guy is a really bad guy. And here we're talking about giving him really, quite honestly, some of our nuclear secrets. Why would you ever do that? Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, that just doesn't make any sense. You can say we're a friend, and we're getting to be better friends, but this is the boundary of our friendship. It's not going to include a lot of nuclear energy stuff, because you could turn around tomorrow and be our enemy, and then what have we done? We've given the oil kingdom the keys to the kingdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It is a mess. It is an absolute mess right now. David, we need to take another break. David Layman and I will be right back after this.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's Progressive Talk from TuneIn.
Hey, if you're looking to buy a new home, or you have one you would like to refinance, call Team Hochberg, our trusted local lender. Go to Google. There's nearly 800 5-star Google reviews. Here's one from Mary. David is fantastic. He's always ready to help, whether buying, selling, refinancing, or helping with finances. He's patient, even with complicated issues, and goes the extra mile when others wouldn't. I can't recommend him enough. You won't regret calling David for any of your mortgage issues. I'm recommending him to my daughter and anyone needing a mortgage. So Mary called for help consolidating her debt and was so thankful for David's guidance that she posted a 5-star review. If you want that same outstanding service that Mary got, call Team Hochberg now, 855-563-2843 or online 56david.com. Team Hochberg has helped me, thousands of CPT listeners, and thousands of others, but they can't help if you don't make that call. 855-563-2843 or go online 56david.com. ACM Equal Housing Lender, NMLS 643114.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm talking with longtime newsman David Layman, and I'm a little disappointed in us. We had one whole segment, and we did not solve the Iran war. So
that's above my pay grade.
Is there anything like more manageable that we can manage? Do you think that we're ever going to get the full Epstein files?
I do. I actually do. But I think
will I still be alive when that happens?
Well, I don't know, Joan. How's your health?
I don't know. I think it's okay.
Hey, I wanted to throw something to you. I saw this today as I was going through some news reading. Two things. Before I get to that, I just want to say one thing. Going back to the first segment when I was doing my vacation interview with you.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing. I would never do that without appreciating the fact that reaching out to old girlfriends, that their husbands, if they are still alive, I would never do it if it was something that they weren't comfortable with. So I just want to make that clear, because otherwise,
well, the fact that you came home alive, I think, kind of gives the truth to that. I mean, nobody killed you, right?
Yeah,
nobody beat you up.
Well, it also helped that some of them, their spouses were not alive, but,
well, yeah, there's a plus.
A couple were, and they're very understanding that Dave comes back every now and then and has lunch with his wife. I just want to be sure that people didn't find that to be terribly insensitive or insensitive at all. The other thing I was going to ask you, I'm going to play the interview with you now for a minute, if you don't mind. An interesting piece in the New York Times today is about couples taking separate vacations and the pros and cons about that.
Well,
What do you think? What do you think about that?
When I was married, when I was young, when I was in my 20s, I had vacation coming up and my husband did not. And, I thought, well, what am I going to do? Just like sit around for a week? And so I found some discount airfare, because even though I was on television, I wasn't making a lot of money.
Right.
And I went to Paris for a week. It was one of those all-inclusive, here's the airfare, here's the hotel. I went to Paris by myself for a week. And it was okay. But I will tell you, you're seeing all these things, and it's wonderful, but I wanted to turn and talk about it with somebody. I wanted to say, oh, my God, look at that. Look at that statue. This restaurant looks really interesting. And that was the thing. I don't know. I guess, I know a lot of girlfriends, who have this friend group, and they'll go on a trip once a year. Not too many women in television, though, had that, because we never were all off at the same time.
Yeah,
but, I've heard of that kind of thing. But, I wouldn't recommend. I know a lot of people now, there's a lot of solo travelers, but I found it was okay, but it was frustrating not to be able to talk about everything I saw and everywhere I went. Maybe if I was with a whole group of girlfriends, that might be different. But I don't think, if you're not on vacation with one of your kids, with your partner, with your girlfriends, I don't know. I think it's lonely.
Right. Because you've seen, as you say, you go to the Eiffel Tower, and if it's your first time, how do you share that with somebody? But a couple of things that the psychologists or the psychotherapists came up with were on both sides. One was, when you come back from the trip, you're reinvigorated. You're bringing tales of your story, kind of like what I just did for the first 10 minutes, and you're kind of re-energized, and it brings new energy perhaps to your relationship. The downside of that is there are a lot of people who may be very comfortable leaving on their own, but their wife or their husband may not be so keen about it, and may even worry that their wife is going to have a couple of drinks at some great restaurant or some great bar, and they're going to end up being a little, I don't know. You fill in the blank.
A little out of coloring outside the lines, kind of a thing.
Yes, I like that.
Even the people I know who've done the separate vacations, they have a lot of trust in one another. And, I guess it's different. I once volunteered with a woman whose husband would travel by himself. Like, he did this great trip to Morocco. I mean, he was riding camels and doing this. And she said, I don't like to travel. And my husband loves to travel. And essentially what she kind of implied was that on those occasions when she did have to travel, she maybe wasn't the most pleasant company because she was doing something she really didn't like. And that worked for them. I mean, he got to explore places and she got to stay home. So for them, it was, it worked out. I don't know. It wouldn't work for me, I don't think. How about you?
No, I like the company. Even though I've at various times in my life, I've been soloed because of the itinerancy of the news business. So I'm comfortable being alone because I've had that in various times of my life. So I'm comfortable. I was telling a friend of mine that I have no compunction about going into a restaurant alone and sitting there and ordering food and eating, because I'll pull my phone out. I'll look at some things. It's one of the good things about a phone is that you can spend some time looking at some things you haven't had time earlier in the day to do, and that's a good catch-up period. So I kind of like that.
Well, I've never had a problem. And again, because especially if you're in the news business and you're dating somebody in the news business, the chances of you two having the same schedule are almost zero.
No.
I have no problem going out to eat by myself. I mean, I'll bring a book. If I don't feel like people watching, I've done that many times. That doesn't bother me at all. But, you know, I grew up as an only child, so I don't think I view being alone with myself quite the way maybe people who've had a lot of siblings do.
Well, also, I think it boils down to, and maybe this is an overstatement on my part, I think it also boils down to self-confidence. I think a lot of people who have a good deal of self-confidence aren't worried about what other people think if they see a man or a woman in a restaurant eating alone and, you know, apparently having a decent time, you know, reading or a book, whether it's a book, a magazine, or your phone. So I think it takes a lot of self-confidence to be able to do that, and that's not something that everybody has, and it varies from person to person.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I've talked to people who feel like if they're eating alone, somehow that makes them like a loser. And if they're eating alone, like they can't go to a restaurant, they'll do takeout. But, you know, God forbid I sit there by myself. Well, why not? I'm great company for myself. I love myself. I find myself fascinating. But that probably doesn't surprise you.
That doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is you admit it.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, my goodness. Are there any other world problems we can solve in the next 3.5, 4 minutes?
Well, we actually only have 1.5 minutes. Because usually when I talk to you, I completely run up against the computer and I can't tell anybody what, like, who's going to be on the next show, who's going to be on in the morning, who's going to be on my show tomorrow. I can't do any of that because you keep me engaged to the last possible second. So right now, I'm telling you, we have 45 seconds. Do with it what you will.
No, I want to know who's coming up. Tell me what, promote your program. I want to see you a success, continue to be a success.
Well, we have the next show is Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez, and she's going to be talking to Illinois State Rep Murray Briel, along with a couple of other folks, Sandra Delgado of the Sandra Delgado Experience. Tomorrow on Choose Views, that's Richard Chew. That's his show. He calls it Choose Views. That's from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. He's going to have a co-host, Rico Mawat, and their guests are Emily Williams, who does the podcast Beyond Voting, and from the Chicago Financial Future Task Force, the co-chairs Karen Freeman Wilson and the CEO of the Urban League. Hey, you asked for this. You be quiet and you listen. And then tomorrow,
your fellow broadcasters ought to pay me for what I've been able to do for them through you.
Tomorrow, I'm going to have one of my favorite days, probably second only to talking with Dave Layman. For the first hour after we do our first hour of chatting, so actually that would make it the second hour. Math. I'm going to be doing a segment on media. I do these once a month, and sometimes I have a few guests, but usually it is Mark Jacobs, who writes a newsletter and works with Courier Newsrooms, and Jennifer Schulze, who does a very popular Substack called Indistinct Chatter, and sometimes writes for The Contrarian. And we talk about everything that's going on in the news. Lots of these conversations lately have focused on Barry Weiss, but that's a talk for another day. But one of these days, I'll have to invite you to join the media segment because
I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
I love talking about the media.
Yeah. And one time, well, I'm running out of time already. Mark wasn't available, so I got Bruce Rines, our friend Bruce Rines, to do it. And I didn't realize when Bruce was in Chicago, He was part of something called the Dateless and Homely Club, and Jennifer was part of the Dateless and Homely Club, which is what was all the people from broadcasting who couldn't find any kind of relationships outside the industry got together to go out themselves. So yeah. So there's that. But you would have a lot of fun with that. We have a great time. And now I only have 5 seconds. So thank you very much, David Layman. I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Have a great evening. Good night.